In the UFC, not every battle ends with blood and bruises. Some end in silence. A kiss that stunned the world. Half a pound that cost a crown. A 5-year exile over smoke. A war snubbed by the judges. And a champion crucified for playing it safe. These aren't just controversies. They're turning points. Moments that never made the highlight reel, but changed everything. Welcome to the dark side of the octagon, where rules are bent, reputations are made, and history is rewritten without a single punch thrown. If you love stories the cameras tried to forget, hit subscribe. You're about to see MMA like never before. Starting with UFC Weird Kiss. At UFC 306, Merab Dvalishvili did something no one had ever seen in a UFC title fight. He kissed his opponent. Midway through round 2, while riding Sean O'Malley's back in a grappling exchange, Merab leaned in and pressed his lips against the back of O'Malley's neck. The crowd fell silent. So did the commentary booth. It was so surreal, referee Herb Dean had to step in and say words no one ever expected to hear in the octagon. Don't kiss him. And Merab didn't deny it. After the fight, he explained that it was a mental tactic, a psychological play meant to assert dominance, shake O'Malley's composure, and make a statement. It wasn't disrespect, he told reporters. It was dominance. I was showing him who's the boss. That's why I kissed him. Dana White's reaction? Dry and confused. Weird. I don't know what that was. And maybe that's exactly the point. It wasn't a strike or a foul. It was a bizarre middle school mind game played out on the biggest stage of the year. But the kiss was just one part of the story. The rest of it was pure suffocation. 5 rounds of relentless pressure, chain wrestling, mat returns, and positional control. Merab didn't knock O'Malley out. He drowned him minute by minute. O'Malley had flashes, quick escapes, glimmers of striking brilliance. But by the final bell, the decision was clear. 49-46, 48-47, 48-47. A new bantamweight king was crowned. Ever the showman, O'Malley took it on the chin, but with a grimace. That was gross, he said, leaving the octagon shaking his head. Yet for all of Merab's grinding dominance, it was the kiss that went viral. The internet lit up. Some laughed, some cringed, others felt it crossed the line, but no one forgot it. But not every headline is made inside the cage. Sometimes, the biggest blows land before the fight even begins. Charles Oliveira walked into UFC 274 as the reigning lightweight champion. But before the fight even started, his title was already gone. At the official weigh-ins, Charles stepped on the scale and came in at 155.5 pounds, just half a pound over the lightweight championship limit. Under commission rules, for a title fight, even half a pound over is disqualifying. The response was immediate and brutal. Oliveira was stripped of the title. The belt was declared vacant, no exceptions. But something didn't sit right. According to Charles and his team, he had checked his weight multiple times the night before using the digital scale in his hotel room. It consistently read 155.0. His nutritionist, strength coach, and coaches all confirmed he was on point. Yet, by morning, the official scale said otherwise. And Charles wasn't alone. Several other fighters on the same card, including featherweights and flyweights, also missed weight by exactly 0.5 pounds. Rumors spread like wildfire. Someone had tampered with the scale. Later, UFC officials confirmed that the digital scale had been recalibrated, likely by foreign fighters or cornermen unfamiliar with how the mechanism worked. It wasn't illegal, but it was enough to throw the readings off, just enough to matter. Still, the Arizona State Athletic Commission didn't budge. There were no allowances, no exceptions, no reviews. Charles came back an hour later and made weight on a second attempt, but by then, it was too late. The rulebook was clear. Only fighters who make weight on the first try are eligible to compete for the title. The defending champion had become just another contender. But Charles didn't fold. He stepped into the octagon that night without his belt and submitted Justin Gaethje in the first round. It didn't matter. The win wasn't recorded as a title defense. The belt remained vacant. The champion had done everything right and still walked away empty-handed. If you thought losing a belt over half a pound was harsh, Nick Diaz was about to lose 5 years of his career over weed. Nick Diaz never followed the rules, and in 2015, that nearly ended his career. At UFC 183, Diaz made his long-awaited return, facing Anderson Silva in a high-profile showdown. He lost by decision. But weeks later, no one was talking about the fight. The headlines were all about a drug test. Diaz had tested positive for marijuana metabolites. It was his third offense for cannabis use in Nevada. And this time, the Nevada State Athletic Commission dropped the hammer. Hard. They handed Diaz a 5-year suspension and fined him $165,000, a punishment harsher than what most fighters got for using actual performance-enhancing drugs. The room gasped. Reporters were stunned. Meanwhile, Anderson Silva, who tested positive the same night for multiple anabolic steroids, only received a 1-year suspension. The backlash was immediate. Fans, fighters, and media figures across the MMA world called it what it clearly was: unfair, personal, vindictive. A hit job, a Change.org petition demanding the punishment be overturned quickly gained over 100,000 signatures. UFC stars like Ronda Rousey and Conor McGregor spoke out in Diaz's defense. Even Dana White, never exactly close with Nick, admitted the suspension was ridiculous. At the hearing, one commissioner told Diaz, "Your lawyers were very persuasive, but you don't respect us. This wasn't about weed. It was about power, and Nick had spent years defying theirs." Eventually, public pressure forced their hand. The suspension was reduced to 18 months, and the fine cut to $100,000. But the damage was already done. Nick Diaz had lost another prime year and wouldn't fight again for 6. But sometimes, even when you leave everything in the cage, the recognition doesn't come. At UFC 318, New Orleans, the main event, Max Holloway versus Dustin Poirier, a 5-round war between two legends and the final chapter of Poirier's storied career. From the opening bell, it was electric. Holloway stunned Poirier early. Later, Poirier nearly sealed the deal with a deep choke. By round 5, they were standing toe-to-toe, bleeding, battered, and fueled by pure heart. When the decision came down, Holloway retained his BMF title by unanimous call. 49-47, 49-47, 48-47. But backstage, in the press room, the real shock came from what didn't happen. When the post-fight bonuses were announced, Fight of the Night, the coveted $50,000 award, didn't go to Holloway or Poirier. Instead, it was given to a preliminary bout, Brendan Allen versus Marvin Vettori. Holloway's reaction captured what everyone was thinking. How the hell did we not get Fight of the Night? That's _sir. Let's go tell Dana. Poirier, visibly stunned, echoed the disbelief. We didn't get it? No, it's some bullshit. The MMA world erupted online. Fans, fighters, and media alike called it a robbery. The main event wasn't just the fight of the night, it was the emotional and physical peak of the entire card. Had Poirier received the bonus, he would have broken a record for most fight of the night honors in UFC history. 11 in total, surpassing all others. Now he remains tied. Frustration swept through the community. Holloway confronted reporters live, calm, but clearly disappointed, demanding answers, asking the question everyone was thinking. What else did we need to do? Now, let's talk about Jon Jones' controversial comeback. After a 15-month suspension for a failed drug test, he was set to return against Alexander Gustafsson at UFC 232, a long-awaited rematch scheduled for Las Vegas. Fight week arrived. The posters were up. Fans had already landed in Nevada. Then everything collapsed. Just 6 days before the event, the Nevada State Athletic Commission refused to license Jones. Not because he failed a new drug test, but because he still had trace amounts of turinabol, the same banned substance he tested positive for in 2017, lingering in his system. USADA said it wasn't a new ingestion. They called it a pulsing effect. Scientists backed the idea. Nevada wasn't convinced. With the holidays approaching, they said they needed more time to evaluate. They wouldn't clear Jones to fight, so Dana White made a move no one saw coming. He relocated the entire event. UFC 232 was moved from Las Vegas to Los Angeles on less than a week's notice. California had previously licensed Jones. They reviewed the same data and approved him almost immediately. The card stayed intact. The venue changed. Overnight, fighters, teams, and fans were told to rebook flights, switch hotels, and move training camps across state lines. It was chaos. Fighters on the card lost money. Some couldn't bring full corners. Others had family locked out by the sudden travel shift. One fighter, Megan Anderson, called it disrespectful. Another said, "It'll cost us." It won't cost Jon. It didn't. Jones fought Gustafsson at the Forum in Englewood and dominated. TKO in round 3. He reclaimed the light heavyweight belt and walked away clean. But the message was clear. When a star is big enough, the rules bend. But UFC 232 wasn't the first time Jon Jones disrupted an entire event. Years earlier, his decision led to something even more dramatic, the first canceled in UFC history. It was set to be Jon Jones versus Dan Henderson. UFC 151, Las Vegas. Light heavyweight title on the line. But just 10 days out, disaster struck. Henderson tore his MCL. The fight was off. The UFC scrambled. In desperation, they turned to Chael Sonnen, offering him the fight on short notice. Sonnen said yes immediately. No training camp, no hesitation, just a shot of gold. But Jon Jones said no. Without a main event, Dana White pulled the plug. UFC 151 was canceled, the first pay-per-view in UFC history to be completely scrapped. The fallout was swift and brutal. Fighters on the undercard who had trained for months lost their paychecks. Sponsors pulled out. Fans lost money on flights, hotels, and non-refundable bookings. Dana White didn't hold back. He pointed the finger at Greg Jackson, Jones' coach, calling him a sport killer. He slammed Jones for being selfish, accusing him of costing dozens of fighters their livelihoods. Jon Jones defended his choice. He argued that accepting a new opponent on 10 days' notice, without a full camp, was reckless and unfair. He made a calculated decision, not an emotional one, but the damage was already done. The UFC later rebooked the fight with Sonnen at UFC 159 the following year. Jones won by TKO, but the backlash from UFC 151 never fully disappeared. For many, it was the moment Jon Jones stopped being just a champion and started becoming a controversial figure. Now, let's talk about the scorecards controversy. The octagon has seen knockouts, submissions, and upsets, but nothing causes more chaos than the judges' scorecards. Some decisions don't just confuse fans, they break trust. Take UFC 104. Lyoto Machida versus Mauricio Shogun, 5 hard rounds. Rua chopped at Machida's legs, landed body kicks, and pushed the pace. Almost every media outlet scored it for Rua, but the judges gave it to Machida, unanimous. The crowd booed. Even Dana White later said, "I had it 4-1 Shogun." A rematch was booked. Rua ended it in 1 knockout. Then there's Leonard Garcia versus Nam Fan at the TUF 12 finale. Fan clearly outstruck Garcia all 3 rounds. Worked the body, stayed composed. Commentators were already congratulating him mid-fight. The decision, Garcia by split. The reaction, stunned silence, then outrage. Bisping versus Hamill. Sanchez versus Campman. Henderson versus Edgar II. GSP versus Hendricks. Each added to the pile. Inconsistent scoring. Regional bias. Outdated boxing standards. Fighters were left wondering, what matters more? Damage, volume, or control? The UFC revised its criteria in 2017, giving more weight to effective striking and impact. But change has been slow. Commissions still vary. Judging stays subjective. Fighters aim for knockouts. Fans pray for clarity. And every time a close fight goes the wrong way, old ghosts come back to life. Now let's talk about the night. Even GSP's image got a little greasy. GSP always been seen as one of the cleanest guys in the UFC. No failed drug tests, no scandals, just straight up discipline and respect. That reputation stayed solid until his rematch with BJ Penn at UFC 94. That's when things got a little greasy. BJ's team claimed GSP had Vaseline rubbed on his chest and shoulders between rounds to make him harder to grapple. They said it was a sneaky move to shut down BJ's jiu-jitsu from the bottom. And if you watch the footage, they kind of had a point. You can clearly see GSP's cornerman putting Vaseline on his face, which is normal for cuts. But then he rubs it on his shoulders and back too, which is illegal. But the fight went on. GSP looked sharp and dominant, and he ended up finishing BJ in round 4. The commission reviewed everything afterward, but didn't overturn the result. GSP said it was just a breathing technique his team always used. Nothing shady. Still, BJ never let it go. To this day, he insists that the fight wasn't fair, and that he got cheated out of a real chance. I'm totally with BJ on this one. Look, every weekend, it's kind of a tradition now. Me and the boys, we lather up in Vaseline, switch off the lights, and wrestle like it's the finals of some underground championship. And let me tell you, it's no joke. The struggle, the strategy, the sweat, it's real. And before you even say it, no, I'm not talking about anything else being hard. I'm talking about the wrestling, alright? It's brutal out there in the dark. Some fights end with knockouts, but these moments ended with confusion, silence, and controversy. They didn't just shake careers, they exposed the cracks in the sport itself. And while the cameras moved on, these stories still echo. If this is the side of MMA they don't want you to see, then hit subscribe, because this is just the beginning.